My ex-wife left me for a better man. A year later, she called me, begging to come back. I just laughed. I used to believe that marriage was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place of comfort, love, and understanding. But for me, it became something else entirely. A prison with no bars, no locks, just an invisible weight pressing down on me, suffocating me a little more each day. My name is John Carter, and on paper, I have a life most men would envy. I'm 40 years old, working a stable job in finance, providing well for my family. My wife, Lisa Mitchell, is stunning, the kind of woman who turns heads when she walks into a room. We have a 10-year-old son, Ethan, who means everything to me. To the outside world, we are the picture of a perfect family. But behind closed doors, things are different. Lisa wasn't always like this. I remember the early days when she was kind, affectionate, full of warmth. But over time, something shifted. Now, every word out of my mouth seems to annoy her. If I come home late from work, exhausted from chasing promotions and bonuses to give her the life she wants, she doesn't even look up from her phone. If I mention plans for a vacation, thinking maybe time away together will bring back some spark, she scoffs. You think a trip will fix anything? Maybe try making more money first. Her words cut deep, but I still tried. I still hoped. But hope became harder to hold on to when I realized I wasn't just a husband to her anymore. I was a wallet. Lisa controlled our finances, not in a responsible, let's plan for the future way. No, she controlled them like a noose around my neck. Every paycheck went straight to our joint account, and somehow by the end of the month it was always empty. I'd get alerts about withdrawals I never made, calls from banks about overdue payments I never approved. When I confronted her, she acted like it was my fault. If you made more, this wouldn't be a problem. It wasn't just the money, it was everything. Lisa barely spoke to me anymore, and when she did, it was only to criticize. She stopped touching me. She'd flinch when I reached for her. 6 months. That's how long it had been since we'd been intimate. And then, the signs started. Lisa suddenly cared more about how she looked. Hair done, makeup flawless, perfume lingering in the air every time she left the house. She started keeping her phone close, changing her password, texting late into the night. If I walked into the room, the screen went dark in an instant. At first, I told myself I was imagining things, that I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew. Something was happening, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face the truth. It started with the late nights. Lisa used to at least pretend to have a reason. Dinner with friends, helping a coworker, checking in on her best friend. But over time, she stopped explaining. She barely looked at me when I asked. Why do you always have to question me? She snapped one evening, slipping on heels she hadn't worn in years. I'm not a child, John. I don't need to report my every move to you. The way she said it made me feel ridiculous for even asking. But something felt off. Then, one night, she claimed she was staying over at her best friend's place. It nagged at me. The next morning, I hesitated before making a decision I never thought I'd have to. I called her friend. Lisa? No, I haven't seen her in weeks. Why? My stomach clenched. I muttered a quick excuse and hung up. My hands were shaking. That was the first undeniable crack in the web of lies. The second came a few days later. Lisa was in the shower and her phone, which she usually kept glued to her side, buzzed on the nightstand. I wasn't going to check it until I saw the message flash across the screen. You looked incredible today. I wish we could be together longer. My chest tightened. My hands felt numb. I stared at the screen, willing the words to change, to mean something else. The sender was an unknown number. But I didn't need a name. I knew exactly what this was. I heard the water turn off. My heart pounded as I stood there, phone still in my hand. Lisa walked out, a towel wrapped around her, and froze when she saw my face. I turned the screen toward her. Care to explain this? My voice was steady, but I felt anything but. She barely blinked. Then, unbelievably, she smirked. Oh, that? It's just a coworker. He's harmless. You're really blowing this out of proportion, John. Blowing it out of proportion. Like I was some jealous, insecure fool making up stories in my head. She walked past me, completely unfazed, as if I hadn't just caught her in the middle of a blatant lie. And the worst part? For a second, I doubted myself. Doubt didn't last long. A week later, Lisa told me she had a work meeting that would run late. I watched her dress up, more effort than she'd made for me in years. A tight black dress, red lipstick, a spritz of expensive perfume. That night, instead of waiting at home like a fool, I got in my car and followed her. She drove to a hotel, parked, walked in. Minutes later, a man stepped out of another car, strode right up to her, and pulled her into a kiss. Not just any man, Jake Thompson. I knew him. He was smooth, charming, and a known liar. A man who never committed to anything except himself. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly they ached. For a moment, I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Then, before I even knew what I was doing, I was out of the car, walking toward them. Lisa turned, eyes widening slightly. But there was no guilt, no shame, just mild annoyance, like I had interrupted something inconvenient. I stared at her, then at Jake, who looked me up and down with an almost amused expression. My voice was low, controlled. How long? Lisa tilted her head, crossing her arms. Does it matter? I swallowed hard, my pulse roaring in my ears. You could have just left, Lisa. She let out a dry laugh. Left? For what? To be alone? To be bored? John, let's be real. This, she gestured between us, has been dead for years. You're just too pathetic to admit it. I clenched my jaw, every muscle in my body tense. Jake put a hand on Lisa's waist, smirking like this was some kind of joke. My fists curled, my vision blurring with rage. But I didn't throw a punch. I didn't yell. I just stood there, taking in the woman I had given everything to, realizing finally that she wasn't worth any of it. And that was the moment something in me broke. I drove home that night with my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind was a storm, rage, betrayal, disbelief. Every memory of Lisa, every sacrifice I had made flashed before my eyes. And for what? To be tossed aside like an old, useless thing while she flaunted another man in front of me? My chest ached, but beneath the pain, something new was rising. Resolve? No more. I had spent too many years bending over backward for Lisa, trying to be the husband she wanted, the provider she demanded. But I wasn't going to let her walk all over me in the end. I refused to let her win. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched coffee in my hands, still trying to wrap my head around my next steps. And then Lisa strolled in. Not a hint of guilt, not even an awkward glance in my direction. She poured herself a cup of coffee like nothing had happened, then turned to me with the same indifferent tone she used when ordering takeout. We should get a divorce. I'm done with this. Just like that. No explanation, no emotion. Just a business transaction. I looked at her, waiting for something, anything, that resembled remorse. There was none. But what truly made my blood boil was the manila envelope she dropped onto the table. Inside was a divorce settlement she had already prepared. I want the house, she said casually, taking a sip of her coffee, and you'll cover the legal fees, plus a decent spousal support. You know, to help me get back on my feet. I let out a low, humorless laugh. You seriously think I'm just going to hand you everything? After what you did? Lisa didn't flinch. She shrugged. Well, I sacrificed my youth for this marriage, John. It's only fair I get something out of it. I stared at her in disbelief. The sheer audacity. This woman had just spent God knows how long cheating on me, draining our finances, treating me like an afterthought. Yet she thought she deserved a reward? I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. Lisa, if you think I'm going to roll over and let you take everything, you've lost your damn mind. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Then I guess I'll have to fight for it. So that's exactly what she did. Lisa hired a lawyer, some bottom-of-the-barrel guy who clearly wasn't used to handling anything more complicated than parking tickets. And it showed. The first set of divorce papers came back riddled with errors. My name, misspelled as John instead of John. Our wedding date, wrong. Ethan's birth date, also wrong. The list of assets, hilariously inaccurate. It included a luxury penthouse we never owned and a golden retriever we never had. Hell, Even her lawyer's name was misspelled on some of the forms. I should have been furious. Instead, I saw an opportunity. Every time they submitted the paperwork, I sent it back with a request for corrections. 7 times. 7 rounds of ridiculous, avoidable mistakes. And every single time, Lisa grew more and more unhinged. "Just sign the damn papers, John," she snapped after the 5th failed attempt. I smirked. "Maybe tell your lawyer to proofread next time." Her frustration was delicious. The longer this dragged on, the more desperate she became. And I wasn't going to make it easy for her. When the case finally made it to court, Lisa walked in with the confidence of a woman who thought she had already won. She had a new lawyer by then. Still not a great one, but at least this one could spell my name correctly. Her demands were absurd. She wanted full ownership of the house, half my savings, and for me to cover her entire $10,000 legal bill. The judge barely even entertained it. I calmly laid out the facts. Lisa had been unfaithful. She had mismanaged our finances. Her legal team had made error after error, dragging out the process unnecessarily. I made it clear. I wasn't paying for their incompetence. "I have no obligation to cover the cost of mistakes made by her legal counsel," I stated firmly. The judge agreed. Lisa lost it. Right there, in the middle of the courtroom, she snapped. "This is unfair. He's just trying to punish me," she shrieked, practically shaking. The judge remained unimpressed. In the end, she walked away with nothing but the clothes on her back. No spousal support. No house, no financial gain, nothing. As I stepped out of the courthouse, a weight lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I was free. Lisa had spent so much time plotting how to destroy me, but in the end, she had only destroyed herself. And something told me life wasn't going to be easy for her after this. Lisa wasted no time after the divorce. The ink on the papers was barely dry before she packed her bags and moved in with Jake Thompson, convinced she had finally escaped the dull, suffocating life she blamed me for. She thought she had won, thought she had traded up, thought she was stepping into a life of excitement and luxury. She had no idea she was about to step into a nightmare. For all of Lisa's arrogance, she had been blind to the truth about Jake. She had assumed that because he wore designer suits and drove flashy cars, he was wealthy, that he would take care of her the way I did. Reality hit her fast. Jake wasn't rich, at least not in the way Lisa had imagined. He had no stable job, no real income. He had been living off the women before her, charming them into paying his way until he bled them dry and moved on to the next. And now, Lisa was his next victim. At first, she tried to ignore the signs. She convinced herself that Jake was just going through a rough patch, that he would figure things out soon. But the first time she asked him for money, his response made her blood run cold. "Money? You're the one who was married to a banker, sweetheart. I thought you had plenty to spare." Lisa laughed it off that night, but deep down, a seed of panic took root. Jake wasn't going to take care of her. He expected her to take care of him. Back when Lisa was married to me, she never had to think about money. She spent freely, knowing I would always be there to refill the account. But after the divorce, I had changed every password, shut down every joint card, cut off every financial lifeline she once had access to. Suddenly, Lisa was on her own. No more designer shopping sprees. No more housekeepers to clean up after her. No more spa days, fine dining, or extravagant vacations. She went from living like a queen to struggling to afford takeout. And Jake, the charming, confident man she had thrown everything away for? He got meaner, more impatient, less affectionate. "What exactly do you bring to the table, Lisa?" he snapped one night when she hesitated before handing over her last $200. Lisa had never been in this position before. She had always been the one in control, the one making demands. But without money, she was nothing to Jake. And he made sure she knew it. But Lisa's real nightmare was just beginning. See, she had one financial responsibility during our marriage, paying the mortgage on a house that belonged to her uncle, Robert Mitchell. It was a simple arrangement. Robert let us live there for a reduced price, and Lisa handled the payments. Or at least she was supposed to. Turns out Lisa hadn't paid a dime in 6 months. Robert was panicking. The bank had sent foreclosure notices, and he was on the verge of losing the house. With nowhere else to turn, he did something Lisa never saw coming. He called me. I hadn't spoken to Robert since the divorce, but the desperation in his voice was clear. He begged me to help, said he would sell me the house at a discount just to avoid losing it completely. And that's when I saw my opportunity. I'll buy the house, I told him. But Lisa? She's on her own. Robert agreed. He had to. And just like that, I became the legal owner of Lisa's old home. Lisa found out a week later when she came by, hoping to beg Robert for money. Instead, she found me sitting in what used to be our living room. She went pale. "What the hell are you doing here?" she hissed. I leaned back, calm, collected. "Funny, I was about to ask you the same thing." Her eyes darted around, panic setting in. "Where's Uncle Robert?" "Gone. He sold me the house." Lisa's mouth opened. But no sound came out. I could see it. The moment she realized she had nothing left. No home, no husband, no money. Even the man she had destroyed our marriage for had no use for her anymore. And then, she snapped. "You ruined my life!" she screamed, shaking with fury. "You did this on purpose." I tilted my head. "No, Lisa. You did this to yourself." She froze. For the first time since all of this started, she had no comeback, no excuses, no way to twist things in her favor. She had finally lost everything. A year had passed since the divorce, and my life had never been better. I had lost 50 pounds, built muscle, and felt stronger than ever. With no financial deadweight dragging me down, I focused on my career and earned a major promotion with a six-figure salary. But the best part? I finally had time for Ethan. I became his football coach, something I never could have done before. Seeing him laugh, seeing the pride in his eyes when I showed up, it made everything worth it. For the first time in years, I was truly happy. Of course, Lisa hadn't disappeared completely. She still sent late-night messages, ranging from meaningless small talk to obvious bait. Sometimes it was an accidental text meant for someone else. Other times a simple, "I miss you." I never responded. She tried cryptic apologies, followed by random complaints about how hard life was. I ignored them all. Then there were the family events, school functions, birthdays, holidays. Lisa always showed up, always watching me from a distance. Her once confident eyes were now filled with something else, desperation. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I had moved on. Lisa, however, had not. One Saturday, while coaching Ethan's football game, I noticed a familiar figure in the stands. Lisa. She had dressed up, way too much for a kid's game. A fitted dress, perfect makeup, heels sinking into the grass. She cheered loudly, playing the role of the devoted mother, acting as if she had never walked away from Ethan in the first place. After the game, as the kids packed up, she approached me with a warm smile, the same one she used to give before our marriage crumbled. "John, do you have a moment?" Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. I had a feeling I knew exactly where this was going. "Sure," I said flatly. We stepped away from the crowd and she took a deep breath, her eyes shining with something that almost looked like nostalgia. "I've been thinking a lot," she began, her voice dripping with sweetness. "We used to be a family. Ethan needs both of us. Don't you think we should try again?" I blinked, then almost laughed. She really thought I would forget everything. I tilted my head, pretending to consider it. "So, you want to get back together?" "For Ethan's sake?" Lisa nodded eagerly. "Yes. He would be so happy if we were a family again." I crossed my arms. "Lisa, let's cut the act. Is this really about Ethan? Or is it because you have nowhere else to go?" For a split second, her face stiffened. That was all I needed to see. Lisa quickly forced a nervous laugh. "John, don't be ridiculous. I just think we should—" She hesitated, then, as if trying to sweeten the deal, blurted out, "If you take me back, I'll pay you the $1,100 for fixing my car." I stared at her, stunned. Then I burst out laughing. Wait, I said, still chuckling. "So you're offering me $1,100 to get back together? That's your grand offer?" Lisa's face drained of color. She wasn't joking. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered, "You really don't love me at all anymore, do you?" I adjusted my jacket and met her gaze without hesitation. "No, Lisa, not even a little." Then I walked away. As I got into my car, I saw Lisa still standing there, her fists clenched. There was something in her eyes, something unhinged. This wasn't over, and I had a bad feeling her next move was going to be even crazier. Months passed, and my life kept getting better. The late-night texts from Lisa had dwindled, replaced by silence, something I welcomed. I had fully moved on, focusing on my career, my son, and, for the first time in years, my own happiness. Then, out of nowhere, I met Sarah Brooks. Sarah was nothing like Lisa. She had her own thriving career, made her own money, and had zero interest in controlling or manipulating me. She didn't need me to survive. She simply chose to be with me because she wanted to. It was a foreign feeling, being with someone who didn't drain me emotionally or financially. For the first time in my life, I felt what it was like to be loved without conditions. I should have known Lisa wouldn't handle it well. Sarah and I had been dating for a few months when she posted a photo of us on Facebook. It was just a casual shot from our weekend trip. Us smiling by the lake, nothing extravagant. But that was all it took to send Lisa into a full-blown meltdown. That night, my phone blew up. Missed calls, voicemails, dozens of messages. "You're a traitor. How could you humiliate me like this? You disgust me, John. I can't believe you'd stoop this low. I hope you know you just ruined any chance of us ever fixing this." I chuckled as I scrolled through her messages, shaking my head. She actually believed I had been waiting around, hoping for another chance with her. I didn't reply. Lisa, of course, didn't take silence well, and when anger didn't work, she tried something worse. A few days later, Sarah called me, laughing. "You won't believe this, but Lisa just called me." I sighed. "Let me guess, she warned you about me?" "Oh yeah, said you were a liar, a cheater, a manipulative monster who ruined her life." Sarah paused, amusement in her voice. She sounded desperate, like she really thought I'd believe her. "And what did you say?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. I just told her, "Thanks for the warning, but I can judge for myself." And then I hung up. I laughed, shaking my head. Lisa had spent years bending reality to fit her narrative, manipulating people into seeing things her way. She truly believed she could control everything, even how others saw me. But for the first time, her tactics didn't work, and that realization broke her. Days passed, then weeks. Lisa went quiet. No calls, no messages. Then, one night, my phone rang at 2 a.m. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. "John." Her voice was slurred, thick with tears. "I messed up." I sat up, rubbing my temples. "Lisa, it's late." I can't do this without you," she sobbed. "Jake, he's not who I thought he was. He hurts me, John. He treats me like garbage. He never loved me. But you did." Her words hung in the air. For a split second, a part of me, the part that had once loved her, almost felt sorry. But then I remembered everything. The years of manipulation, the lies, the betrayal. Lisa wasn't crying because she had lost me. She was crying because she had lost control. I closed my eyes and sighed. "Yeah, Lisa, I did love you, but that was a long time ago." There was silence on the other end, then a shaky breath. "So, there's no chance?" "No, Lisa, there isn't." I hung up. Somewhere, in the dark, Lisa sat alone, fully realizing what she had done. She had spent years taking me for granted, thinking she could always do better. And now? She had nothing. She had played every card, pulled every trick, only to lose everything in the end. Lisa had once believed Jake was the man who would give her the life she deserved, someone better than me. But now, the mask had come off. The charming, confident man she had left everything for was nothing more than a cruel, controlling brute. Jake no longer bothered with sweet words. He mocked her when she complained about money. "You think I'm John? Some cash cow for you to drain?" He sneered when she mentioned getting a job. "What could you possibly do? You've spent your whole life leeching off men." It got worse. He had a temper. He shouted, slammed doors, threw things. One night, when she accused him of being lazy, he slapped her so hard she hit the floor. Standing over her, his voice was low and cold. "Don't ever compare me to your ex again. Got it? As Lisa lay there, holding her stinging cheek, reality hit her like a train. John had never done this to her. He had never raised a hand, never degraded her. And yet, she had thrown him away for this. The final blow came on a night that would haunt Lisa forever. She and Jake were in the middle of a drunken argument when things turned violent. In his rage, Jake hurled a whiskey bottle across the room. It shattered against the wall, but not before clipping Lisa's forehead. Blood trickled down her face, and Ethan saw everything. The boy let out a terrified scream. He ran to his mother, trying to help, but Lisa pushed him away, her voice shaky. "It's okay, sweetheart. It was just an accident." But Ethan wasn't stupid. He saw the way Jake's chest heaved with anger, the way Lisa trembled. He knew what had really happened. He pulled out his phone, hands shaking, and dialed the only person he could trust. "Dad, Mom's hurt. She won't go to the hospital. I don't know what to do." John didn't hesitate. When I arrived, my breath caught in my throat. Lisa was standing in the living room, blood smeared on her temple. Jake was pacing, still drunk and fuming. And Ethan, my son, was clutching his small backpack, his eyes filled with fear. He ran straight into my arms. I didn't waste a second. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Within minutes, the police arrived. Jake didn't go quietly, but he was too drunk to fight. They hauled him out of the house, screaming and cursing. Lisa stood frozen, her face pale as she realized what was about to happen. She looked at me, her eyes full of fear. "John, you're not going to take Ethan away from me, are you?" I stared at her, my expression unreadable. Was she serious? Did she really think she had any right to keep him after all this? "Watch me." In court, the evidence was overwhelming. I had photos of Lisa's injuries, Ethan's testimony, and Jake's history of domestic violence. The judge didn't hesitate. I was granted full custody. Lisa was only allowed supervised visits. She broke down right there in the courtroom. As I walked out with Ethan by my side, I didn't look back. Lisa had lost everything: her husband, her money, her home, and now her son. But something told me she wasn't done yet. There was one last desperate move she was willing to make. Lisa had lost everything: no husband, no child, no money, no home. She had spent years believing she was untouchable, that she could do whatever she wanted without consequences. But now, reality had come crashing down on her, and she had nowhere left to turn. For days, she tried to convince herself she could rebuild, that she could somehow crawl out of the mess she had created. But the more she tried, the clearer it became. There was no way back. No one wanted to help her. No one wanted to deal with her. And worst of all, no one cared anymore. So, in one last desperate attempt, she did the only thing she could think of. She called me. Her voice was weak, trembling, a broken version of the woman who once thought she ruled over me. "John, I was wrong. Please. Just give me one more chance." I sat there, listening to her breathe on the other end of the line. A year ago, I would have dreamed of this moment, of hearing her beg, of having the power to reject her the way she had once discarded me. But now, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel anything at all. I sighed, gripping the phone tighter for a second before speaking. "Goodbye, Lisa." Then, I hung up. She never called again. As the months passed, my life only got better. Sarah and I grew closer, our relationship built on trust, respect, and genuine love. Things I had never truly known with Lisa. Eventually, we decided to move in together, starting fresh in a home filled with laughter and warmth. Ethan adored Sarah. He looked up to her, confided in her, and for the first time, he had a mother figure who actually cared. Watching them bond, seeing how effortlessly she fit into our lives, it was something I never thought I would have. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Ethan telling a ridiculous story between bites of food, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Lisa. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the message. "Have you really forgotten me?" That was it. No pleading, no manipulation, just a pathetic, empty question from a woman who had finally realized there was no coming back. I sat there for a moment, rereading the message. A year ago, it would have destroyed me. But now, Now it meant nothing. I didn't reply. I simply deleted the message, set my phone aside, and turned back to my family. Sarah smiled at me as she reached for my hand. Ethan laughed about something I had already missed, and in that moment, I knew. This was the perfect revenge. Not anger, not payback. Just living a life so good that Lisa would never be part of it again.